Alright, what's up everyone? We're gonna do a Halo Infinite review. I'm gonna try to have time points throughout the video to make it easy for you to find certain sections that you want to look for. But the review is gonna be out of 5 stars, and at first I'm gonna review the campaign, and secondly I'm gonna review multiplayer. So starting off, the game gets a 2 out of 5 stars. I just don't think it was that good. It was alright. I think Halo is just a good game in general, and like the core mechanics of Halo are really fun and just it's a good first person shooter, but I don't really think the actual story of the campaign was that well, especially when you compare it to past Halos. To me, the campaign in Halo Infinite felt very much like the very first Destiny that came out. And if any of you played the first Destiny, it was kind of repetitive, where you were just told each mission to just like, you would go here, do this, fight this, where you'd like wait and a wave of enemies or multiple wave of enemies would come in and you'd fight them off, and then you'd go back to doing your thing, and like it was really repetitive and kind of boring. The boss fights in Halo Infinite were not that thought out, and it just felt like bullet sponges, or like enemies they just took a bunch of damage. Um, I don't really think Halo is made to have boss fights in it. I know in past Halos there have been boss fights, but like there was never a game fully built around, or Halo's never been a game that's been fully built around just bosses. It's always been about like the story and the characters and scenery and just like the whole setting. It's all just been kind of like one big game built around just a bunch of little pieces or big pieces that kind of make it what it is as a whole. So having the boss fights or trying to switch it over to a boss fighting game doesn't really work out. I also don't get why there was so many boss fights in Halo Infinite. Like aside from the high value targets, which are kind of like optional or like side story bosses, but throughout the main campaign, at the end of most of the missions, you would have a boss to fight. And again, it was like really repetitive. A lot of the bosses were the same, or at least felt somewhat like the same. Some of them were a little different, but again, just bullet sponges. They had really powerful, or well, just power weapons, and yeah, just I don't know, it didn't create a really fun experience. Halo Infinite was really lacking in a lot of epic scenes or fight scenes. If any of you played the older Halos, there was a lot of scenes where you would fight a scarab, or there were missions where you had like a bunch of big vehicle fights where you were either in like a scorpion or some sort of flying vehicle, and you were going up against other flying vehicles or other tanks, and there were just these massive fights and scenes that always kind of were memorable as you were playing the game. And I felt Halo Infinite was really lacking with a lot of that, and they can improve on that. I don't know why 343 Industries hasn't brought back the Flood in any of their games. I think Halo 4 had like a hint or an Easter egg about the Flood, but I know Halo Wars 2 that had a DLC with the Flood. But other than that, there's been no more Halo games with the Flood in it, which I think is kind of weird. The Flood's a really interesting enemy. It To me, the Flood's like a combination of like aliens and zombies, and I think it makes it creates a bunch of unique fights that you don't really get in the other enemies, or at least other enemies in like other games, especially first-person shooter games. It's usually just you shooting someone else who's shooting you, and that's really all it is. But the Flood kind of creates like a swarm enemy that also can do other things and is more intelligent. There was a hint of the Flood in the beginning of the campaign in Halo Infinite that was talked about a lot, and people were thinking the Flood would come back, but I didn't see anything else about the Flood. Some people are thinking there might be like a DLC coming, but we don't know. And I think that's kind of a really big missed opportunity for Halo. One thing I don't think Halo Infinite definitely didn't do was that they killed off Cortana. Like, they kind of killed off Cortana, but they also kind of didn't. So, I probably should have said this in the beginning, but, you know, there's going to be spoilers in this review. But at the end, the weapon, who is like Cortana's replacement, she ends up, at the very end, we find out Cortana dies. And so then the weapon wants to use Cortana's name instead of just being called Weapon or The Weapon. So technically that's now like the new Cortana, but also the old Cortana that we know and been through with all the Halo games is now dead. Supposedly, maybe she might be coming back, I don't know. But it's also really weird that they would just kill her off screen because, you know, she's basically one of the most iconic characters up there with Master Chief and Arbiter. So definitely find that really weird that 343 Industries would do that, but who knows, maybe they'll bring her back because it doesn't make sense to kill off a character that big off screen, or at least not have some sort of epic scene or send off for Cortana. It kind of feels like 343 Industries is making their own version of Halo with Halo Infinite. And even the past couple of Halos, it feels like they're going away from old-fashioned Halo and they're like making their own version of Halo by taking away what made Halo Halo and just trying to piece together futuristic stuff and calling it Halo. I think there's just a lot they can look back on and a lot they can like bring back from the older games that definitely can up some quality of the newer Halos that they make, if they make them. If, you know, 343 Industries might not be the next company making Halo, but who knows, we'll see. So for multiplayer in Halo Infinite, I'm not a huge multiplayer person. I've never really been a huge multiplayer person in any of the Halo games other than Halo Reach, but I did play a little bit of it and I have heard a little bit about it from just reading stuff on Reddit. But I would say personally that the Halo multiplayer experience has kind of been terrible. I don't like that they just removed the XP progression system from when you complete a game. The only way you can level up, which is also leveling up your battle pass, is through doing challenges, which is just a really grindy and boring way of going about playing a game. So now it's like you play multiplayer and, you know, it's fun when you're first playing it, but once you've played through all the maps and all the different game modes, it's kind of just old and repetitive, and now you're not working towards anything. There's nothing to earn from it unless you're working on those challenges. That's one thing that kind of sucks from my perspective about it. I will say it's still like Halo multiplayer. I think Halo has a really just good core mechanics, kind of the same thing about the campaign. Halo's underlying, like, bare bones system is really good and really fun, and it just makes it a really good first-person shooter. But there's other things that 343 Industries kind of took away, or even, I guess, added, but as like a negative. I'm not one to buy items in the item shop, but I will say they are really overpriced. It was like 20 bucks for a weapon skin, which is kind of crazy. Even if it was like a really rare one, there was like a yellow or oranges rare weapon, and it costs like a good $15-20 just to get a skin for it. I don't know, I just don't think it's worth it. It's way too high. They could bring it down to like under $10, maybe even under $5, unless they start bundling stuff up. I mean, bundles is kind of like the only way they could improve the item shop at the prices they have. If they made the prices even higher, that would just make it even worse. There's not a lot of good game modes in multiplayer. There's not really many game modes at all. They did recently add a few new ones in Season 2, but there's definitely a lot that they can improve on, or there's a lot of stuff that they can just add in general to multiplayer. There's a lot of maps that they could add. I'm surprised there's a lot of like old OG Halo maps that they can bring in that I don't get why they don't do that. There's also a lot of older Halo game modes that they didn't bring in. I know Infected was really popular, and I don't know why that wasn't in Halo Infinite at launch, but that's something that they can improve on. And so finally, my last topic, I don't really know if this goes in multiplayer or if this goes in the campaign, but there was no Forge at launch. There was no Forge at launch on Halo 5 either. That's just a huge negative. Forge is extremely fun. I had a lot of fun just messing around with it when me and my friends would hop on Halo Reach, but it's also used to make a bunch of community-made games or game modes. And I don't get why it was never in the game at launch. Alright, so those are the reasons why I gave Halo Infinite 2 out of 5 stars. Let me know if you think that should be higher or if you think it should be lower. Also, let me know if there's anything that you didn't like about Halo, or maybe some things that I didn't mention that you really loved about Halo Infinite. Let me know if there's anything that you think 343 Industries could improve on in general with just like the past Halos that they've come out with. But yeah, that's gonna do it for this video, and I'll see you on the next one.